Hey guys, Uri here. I just wanted to do a couple editor notes before the episode gets started. As I was kind of editing this episode, I'd noticed that there's been a lot of audio issues. We're definitely working on that. I'm getting some more equipment in, hopefully this weekend or possibly in the coming weeks, just to kind of counteract that. We want to try and offer the best uh, listening experience for you guys, so we're definitely working on that. I also wanted just to kind of apologize for my lack of energy. As we said in the episode, I had just gotten over some food poisoning and just some kind of illness, so that my energy wasn't quite there. We're also going to be trying and doing these episodes on Sundays. It was just with my work schedule, it's really hard to record them at like 8 o'clock at night when I get home from work. And I think by doing it on a Sunday and then editing and getting it on Monday, it'll be a lot easier for me, Pavel, and just to get these episodes out in a timely manner. But besides that, I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. Thank you. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Dogfight Podcast. This is your host, Uriah, and I'm joined by my co host.
Pavel, hello. Good to be here.
Man, it's been a crazy weekend. We're actually recording this on a Tuesday. Tuesday, yeah. We meant to record it either Sunday or Monday, but I ended up getting like low key food poisoning, so it's
Yep,
been fun.
it happens. We ball. We figured this out as we go.
It actually gave me a chance to kind of rewatch some of the fights though, from the weekend. So that actually helped because I had nothing else to do with my life for the last 48 hours.
To be fair, it's hard to do much when you're sick.
Yeah, so I just kind of sat in bed and just kind of watched highlights and perished.
Yeah, well, glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. But we had a great card over the weekend. I mean, I was thoroughly surprised.
oh
How
yeah,
about
I
you?
I think I think all of us were. But before we get into that, one thing that I've gotten from feedback from folks is that um, that people want to listen to the podcast, but they don't really know what we're talking about. So I figured I'd give a little bit of a rundown just to kind of familiarize folks with some of the basics, some of the jargon, so that it doesn't seem like we're speaking in an alien language uh, completely.
Eh,
So yeah, let me. I figure I'll just run through some of the.
just like the basic vernacular and kind of the setup of like the mixed martial arts game and like
Right,
logistics
exactly.
of it all.
Yep. Yeah. So I guess I'll start us at the top. So we got, if you hear me say MMA, that's mixed martial arts, and we're talking about people fighting each other. I think that was clear though. Usually a mix of we got wrestling in various forms. We've got various striking arts such as Muay Thai, such as kickboxing, such as Sanda. Sometimes that's a Chinese martial art. Um, Definitely forgetting some more obvious ones. And then we've got more grappling arts like wrestling, as I said, which is either American wrestling or Moldova has great wrestling for some reason.
Russian
Uh,
sambo.
yep, sambo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, judo, uh, and so when we talk about wrestling or grappling, um, usually we'll specify which one we're talking about, but it's all sort of wrestling of a sort. Um, and when and as well, there are a few concepts kind of that are more MMA specific. I'm thinking specifically with takedowns and takedown defense. Takedowns are something that you see in wrestling a lot. Takedown defense or defensive wrestling, I suppose, as we call it sometimes, is people trying to stay on their feet and trying to dodge those sort of takedown attempts. And also, when we say people are doing a scramble or doing a sweep, those are two techniques used by people to get up off the ground when they're being wrestled. So this all kind of defensive wrestling or defensive grappling. Um, Alternatively, we also have with striking. Striking is a little bit more straightforward. Sometimes, if we say something like a feint or something, that means somebody, which we will be talking about a feint um, that was very high profile on this
Very high
episode.
profile.
That worked very very well.
Sneaky,
And we
sneaky.
Yes. Actually, we had one on the last episode too. A feint is a movement made to catch the attention of of the other fighter to distract them and to make them do something else.
You're essentially
So that they
throwing
come.
like a false flag. You're gonna move one way, but you actually move the complete opposite direction, or you do another thing, in contrast of that.
Exactly, exactly. So now anybody who played Pokemon and never knew what feint attack meant, that's what that means. Um,
I should never
I
put
learned.
that together.
Well, now you know too, Yuri. I thought the same. I thought it was feint with an A for
And
the
I call
longest time.
myself a Pokemon fan.
No, you're good. Yeah, we can cover
Pokemans.
my terrible Pokemon takes later. Um, but that's a little beyond the scope of this intro. And yes, so we're talking about mostly we talk about UFC. Sometimes we talk about which is the main
The
mixed
the
martial arts.
UFC is, and to kind of tie it to like another sports analogy, it's essentially like the NFL. It's the big draw, the big promotion, the big league of fighting. Like there's obviously different other promotions, and promotions are essentially just other companies,
Mhm.
but the UFC is kind of like the premier, like I said, like the NFL or like the Premier League or the MLB. It's like the cream of the crop, top of the top.
Right. Yep. So that's what yeah, and that's Ultimate Fighting Championship, although people I mean that's we'll just call it UFC, it's easier. The other two promotions the other three promotions that we'll mention ever really even briefly are there's one championship which is an Asian promotion based in Singapore. Um, where a couple of high profile former UFC fighters have gone, such as Demetrius Johnson, who was a probably the greatest flyweight to fight. I'll talk about weight classes in a little bit. Um, but so he went to one championship. There's Bellator, which is kind of the number two American promotion. They're kind of where a lot of older UFC fighters will go to kind of get paid without leaving
They
America.
tend to do also something that in the industry they call like free show fights, where they would pair up two fighters that normally wouldn't be paired up, mainly just as a money draw or just as a cash grab, and they're fun
Just
to
as like a
watch.
look at this. This is so silly.
This
You
is
should
this
tune
is
in.
so quirky and different. This is something that other promotions aren't doing, and they're fun to watch. Sometimes,
Yeah. Mhm.
looking at you, Data 5000.
Yep, exactly. And who is a former fighter. He fought Kimbo Slice in MMA. Kimbo Slice, the famed street fighter. Some of y'all may have heard of.
And
Guy with the
arguably
big
one of
beard.
the worst fights ever.
Yeah, he was not good.
It
Yes.
was not fun to watch.
And then finally, there's Professional Fighters League or Professional Fighting League. I don't remember. It's PFL. We'll talk about which I mentioned on the last episode because people are recently jumping from UFC to PFL because they can make more money there as well. There's one actually.
PFL,
Yeah,
that's ran by, is it ESPN or
I think ESPN's heavily involved. They broadcast everything on ESPN, but
yeah.
I don't think it's run
Okay,
by
okay.
ESPN.
It's definitely one of the newer kind of like the new kid on the block. Their whole style is a kind of like a tournament tree style,
Mhm.
which is actually really interesting and modern mixed martial arts. Back in the day, they would have fights called Grand Prix, which was like a tournament tree style in one night. But this is like spread out over a course of like several months to a year, which I think is really interesting to watch. And it's a neat take on the fight game.
Yeah, it's very novel and it's definitely different than what we get usually these days. Bellator does a few Grand Prix these days, but they're spread like they're not traditional one night Grand Prix anymore. Couple other promotions. If we mention Ryzen, Ryzen is the premier Japanese promotion. A couple of high profile fighters have jumped from there to the UFC, notably light heavyweight champion Yuri Prohaska. Um, and then one that is sadly no longer with us, but we will always remember. If we ever mention Pride FC,
Never
that
die.
was the Pride Never Die. That was the original. Um, that was the original big time Japanese promotion.
Pride
Um,
set the standard and set kind of the foundation of what the modern UFC landscape is. I mean, they were eventually bought out by the UFC, but it really set like it really made mixed martial arts big. And they it started out in Japan, then they somehow like gained a cult following in the United States, and it just spread like wildfire over here back in like the early 2000s, uh, late 90s, I want to say.
Mhm.
Um, Definitely really fun fights. That's where a lot of the legends came from in the
Yep.
modern game, or you'll hear of them like in passing.
Yep. And
One
then
of my
actually,
favorite one
I
of my
remember
favorite
a couple.
promotions.
I was about to say, I forgot a couple other defunct promotions that we still have some connection to these days, and we'll be talking about some of those in this episode. We have first off Strike Force, which was another UFC Bellator competitor,
Fun
which
times.
is no longer around. Ronda Rousey was there. Luke Rockhold, who we will be talking about this episode, had a dominant stretch there. And so quite a few very good fighters came through Strikeforce. Admittedly, that's more your purvey than mine, Yuri, because I'm more
Yeah,
a fan.
again,
But
the
yeah,
old head here.
yep. But that was one of the. It was kind of like not really a precursor promotion to Bellator, but it was kind of like in the same vein as Bellator, except better. And then finally, there's WEC, World Extreme Cage Fighting, which yes, it is a very early 2000s name.
Definitely a product of the early 2000s.
Absolutely. And that promotion is relevant because it was the first promotion in the US, I believe, first major promotion in the US that had the lighter weight classes, aka everything below lightweight. And I'll get into weight classes in a bit. But that's flyweight, bantamweight, featherweight. Um, so a lot of fighters, some of whom are still fighting today, um, such as Dominic Cruz, who we mentioned last episode, and Jose Aldo, who I also mentioned last episode, and who we will be talking about today. They were champions there. They made their names there. So those are that's kind of the state of play. But we'll mostly be focusing on UFC. But that is generally, um, if we mention any of those terms, now you guys know what those mean. Uh, as for weight classes, I figure I should get to those. Generally, weight classes are separated by 10-pound increments up until we get to the higher ones. I'll explain in a sec. So we start with, I'll start with the women's divisions because we have a lighter division in the women's divisions actually. We have 115 pounds, that's straw weight. Then we go to 125, which is flyweight, 135, which is welterweight, bantamweight, and 145, which is featherweight. Um, and
I
so,
just want to say real quick. So like when you hear like 115 or like 125, that is the max weight of that um weight class. Like they can go under. I don't know why someone would go under, but they can be
people
under
do
that weight
use to.
class as long as they're not above that weight limit. They're fine.
Exactly.
That's when they
So,
get penalized and what have you.
right. Um, when So, for example, let's say if something that happens sometimes is that a dominant champion in a lighter division will go up to challenge for the belt of the division above. That's allowed. However, if the champion above wanted to go and challenge for the belt below, they would have to cut a lot of weight in order to be allowed to fight. Um,
And weight
so
cutting
there's
is not a fun process.
Yeah, we'll
Uh,
explain that in a second after we finish the weight classes. So we start with the men. We have flyweight, bantamweight, featherweight. Then we have 155 pounds, which is lightweight. Um, we have After that we jump 15 pounds to 170, which is welterweight, and from there we jump another 15 pounds to middleweight at 185, and then we jump 20 pounds to light heavyweight, and then we jump all the way to 265 for heavyweight. Um, there is super heavyweight above that, but no real promotion does those. Um, One more note: if we ever mention atom weight, that is 105 pounds. Usually, is a women's division. UFC does not have an atom weight division. One championship does. Um, so if you ever hear me complaining about how they should can the women's featherweight division and put in women's atom weight, that's what I'm talking about. Because women's featherweight is not much
it's
of a division.
yeah, it's kind of a mess.
Um, so with weight classes, fighters will often cut weight to get to a lighter weight so they can have a size advantage, or generally just have a strength advantage. Something Yuri, you've weight cut before. I'll cede this to you.
So
Uh,
essentially, yeah. So you would so say you walk around at a certain weight, um, but like your frame is not indicative of it. So like I say I walk around at like 175, 177 on a bad day. Um, but if I wanted to fight at a lower weight class because I'm a smaller frame person, I would have to cut like 10 pounds, say like 160. I think that was what my weight division was for a jiu-jitsu competition. And the reason behind that is if I were to stay at my weight class, I even though I weigh like 175, I am a small frame person. People who are fighting at 175 are typically cutting down, and that they would have a massive size advantage over me. So the
Yep.
goal, the in theory, what you do is you cut your weight down to make the weigh-ins, and then you rehydrate to get all your not muscle mass, but to essentially get your body weight back, so
Right.
that you
Because
you retain your size.
a lot of the weight that gets cut is sweat out through water weight.
It's a lot of sweat. Just a little anecdote, like when I was weight cutting, um, I took this it's like an intramural competition, but they're still doing like a rule set of like a legit, weight set. I had to cut like 10 pounds down. I ate nothing but like fish, rice, and like chicken for like a week and a half. And then I had to pretty much almost dehydrate myself the night before
Ugh.
to make weight. And then after I made weight, I could literally do whatever I want. I ate like 2 burritos that day, and I drank a crap ton of like Pedialyte water just so I could rehydrate myself and get back to like my frame, or that is like my weight size. Um, there's a lot of controversy right now on what constitutes as a safe weight cut and what constitutes as a not safe weight cut. There's there's been a lot of I'd say within the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of fighters dropping out or getting hospitalized because of these dramatic weight cuts. And that this entire thing would go in a different episode. Um,
Mhm.
it it's a way of kind of gaming the game, not necessarily cheating, but gaming the game in terms of getting an advantage over your opponent. Is it ethical? But it's one of those things that everyone's been doing it for literally the dawn of time in
Yeah.
competitive combat sports. That it's just a part of it. It's just a
And
thing they do.
yeah, and it's one of those things where even athletes aren't even really getting an advantage anymore because everybody's weight cutting. If you're not weight cutting, though, you will be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, like
So,
if I were to stay at my weight class without weight cutting, the guys that I would have been grappling against are massive.
mhm.
Yeah, there are some big dudes, and yeah, but I I don't miss weight cutting. I decided to kind of stay at my own weight class and just
As
kind
you
of,
should, as you should.
yeah, it wasn't a smart move.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Yeah, no, like for example, Paulo Costa, who we mentioned last week, and who we will talk about this week as well. He's known for cutting a lot of weight. He fights at 185 pounds at middleweight, and but he has been measured on the night of the fight at weighing about 220 pounds. That's the amount. Some that he's an outlier a little bit, but this is that's the kind of weight these guys can gain in one night. Basically. It's crazy.
the power
Um,
of rehydration is insane. I think I gained like 6 pounds overnight, 6 or 7 pounds overnight, just purely drinking water and rehydrating, getting electrolytes in my system again.
mhm.
It's just insane. Like it took me all that time to cut it, but I just gained it almost right back in a span of like 48 hours, 24 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a whole thing. We will talk more about weight cutting on a future episode because it is a hot button issue and always is a hot button issue. Um, moving on to rankings, UFC maintains a ranking system of their by division of the top fighters in each division. And the reason I bring this up is because we're going to be talking briefly about pound for pound rankings. Pound for pound is a hypothetical ranking where they say if all these guys were the same weight, who would be the best? And it's all hypothetical, and people argue about it a lot. We'll have a brief
And
discussion
it's
about
based
one of the
mainly
choices.
on statistics throughout their fight career too.
Yep. So but yeah, so they maintain a pound for pound ranking, and then they maintain rankings by division. I'll go through briefly the champions in each division. Um, just to set the scene, and I'll just say a little bit about them. And if there's any other characters who are more notable, I'll mention them as we go. I'll start with the women's divisions. We have women's strawweight. We've champion Carla Esparza right now. We're going to talk about her later in this episode because she has a title fight. She has a title defense coming up against Zhang Weili, who is a Chinese fighter and former champion in her own right in the in women's flyweight, the champion is Valentina Shevchenko. She's from Kyrgyzstan. She's maybe the most dominant champion in UFC at the moment, and she's held her title the longest of any champion. Um, then for women's bantamweight and featherweight, actually have the same champion, Amanda Nunes, widely regarded as the greatest women's MMA fighter of all time. She beat names like Ronda Rousey and the lady who beat Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm. Um, trying to
Was a
frame it for people who, would know who Ronda Rousey is. Ronda Rousey is retired. She is now wrestling in WWE. So that's what happened to her before you guys ask. Um, now we move to the men's divisions. We have flyweight, where we have Davison Figueiredo. He's the champion there. He's Brazilian. He has a likely title defense coming up against interim champion Brandon Moreno, who won a interim title fight a few weeks ago.
a great fight, by the way.
Interim champions are usually um, they're champions that UFC appoints. Or they'll have people fight for an interim belt when the champion is injured and can't defend for a while. So that's how Moreno got his interim championship, and they will unify that championship when they fight next. At bantamweight, champion is Aljamain Sterling, my New York boy from Long Island. He's currently awaiting. He has a title defense against a former bantamweight champion from a while ago, TJ Dillashaw, who is one fight removed from a lengthy suspension for performance-enhancing drugs.
Yeah, that's always fun.
Yep. And at featherweight, we have Alexander Volkanovski. He's Australian. He is he's the current pound for pound number one ranked fighter in the UFC as of yesterday, which was not the case a couple days ago.
And we'll go into why in a couple later in the episode too.
Indeed. Lightweight actually doesn't have a champion right now because the previous champion, in something that has never happened before, was stripped of his title because he came into his title defense having missed weight. He weighed too much on the day of the fight by half a pound.
By half a pound, and I was losing my absolute mind that the day of weigh-ins.
Yep. So because they'll do weigh-ins the day before the fight. I should clarify. And so he's kind of the uncrowned champion. He did go on to win his fight that night. He's going to be fighting Islam Makhachev, Russian wrestler, on later this year to appoint the new champion. I'm going to skip over welterweight for now because we're going to talk about that.
We're going to go into a lengthy conversation about welterweight.
Yes. Middleweight champion is Israel Adesanya. He's Nigerian, but is lived in New Zealand for a very long time. He is number 2 pound for pound in the UFC right now, one of the more dominant champions in the promotion. He has a defense. We talked on episode 1 briefly about it, coming up in November against Alex Pereira, a Brazilian kickboxer who holds a win over Adesanya in kickboxing. So that should be interesting. I mentioned him earlier. At light heavyweight, we have Yuri Prochaska from the Czech Republic, former Ryzen champion. He's coming off of a defense against Glover Teixeira, a Brazilian, who was the previous champion. And there are rumors that they're going to rematch each other, but nothing confirmed yet. And at heavyweight, to round it off, we have Francis Ngannou, who's from Cameroon, and has lived in France for a long time. He defended his title at the very beginning of the year, and he's injured. He will be out a long time. He's actually, due to some contract disputes, we talked about fighter pay, he's getting pretty stiff on fighter pay. due to that, he's waiting out his contract and will probably leave the promotion once that is over to
That
go
is going to
box.
cause shockwaves
Yes. So I'm
if
surprised they
and when
haven't
he
done an
does.
interim. I'm surprised they haven't done an interim championship yet for that. I'm sure we'll get one at some point.
They're thinking about it with a fight against John Jones and Stipe Miocic, but that's again another episode for another time.
Exactly.
But
I
all
think
that's still in the works at the moment.
there's a lot of moving parts there. So that's our quick rundown. We have there are a few other high profile characters, but we'll mention them as they come up in our conversations, and we'll tell you all about them. So without further ado, the reason we skipped welterweight is because the main event of the UFC pay per view that just happened, UFC 278, was a fight for the welterweight championship between Kamaru Usman, dominant champion. Well, he was the previous number one pound for pound competitor in the UFC. Had won 15 straight fights. He's Nigerian, but has lived in Nebraska and elsewhere. And he was regarded as one of the most dominant champions in the UFC. And he was fighting a challenger, Leon Edwards, who is from Birmingham, England, primarily a striker. I think he's a kickboxing or Muay Thai. I think it's a
It's
kickboxing
like
background.
Dutch style kickboxing almost.
Yeah. So, and he was coming in, uh, and he's been waiting on this title shot for a long time.
Several
Uh,
years now, I want to say.
it's like 2019.
Yeah,
He's just been passed up in favor of more glamorous opponents, and passed up because he was in England and couldn't train during the lockdown. He had COVID. A whole laundry list of things.
he's not really the most. I'm not gonna say he's hated, but he's not a well liked fighter in the welterweight division. Um,
Mhm.
there's just
Yeah,
he
people
does
were saying he was
he
trying
rubs a
to.
lot of people the wrong way.
Yeah, he was. There were a lot of people were saying, "Oh, shut up and fight already." Um, go earn a title shot if you want one so bad. All that kind of stuff. And so it finally came to fruition on Sunday. And
Saturday.
Kamaru Usman is primarily a wrestler, and he was expected to wrestle. Um, to our surprise, in round one, Edwards out wrestled him. He took down
He
Usman for the first
first
time
career
ever.
takedown on Usman, which is
Yep.
insane. That alone is probably massive in itself.
Yeah, that's 20. That's in 22 fights for Kamaru Usman, or I guess in UFC fights, I think that's 15 or something
Yeah,
like
something
that.
like that.
Yeah, so that's the first, and he was one of the only fighters in the entire promotion who had never been taken down. Colby Covington, one of his rivals, would have something to say about that. He maintains that he got a takedown in one of their in his second title shot against Usman, which he lost, but it was not officially scored a takedown. This one was because it was a takedown.
It was a
He kept him on
clear
his back for a full
outside
round.
trip. It was
Yep.
beautiful.
hmm And so, but then after that, the fight kind of went back to how we expected it would go, which was that Usman was wrestling Edwards pretty effectively and kind of suffocating all of his game. And Edwards was visibly frustrated, um, you know, between rounds.
There were so
Uh,
many points in the fight where just his Leon's body language, like horn sounds, they walk back to their corners. Leon is just hanging, just like arms draped over over the side of the octagon. Just looks physically and mentally and emotionally defeated. Like
mhm.
there were so many points where I just thought he lost heart, which is fair. I mean, given that you just got swarmed on and smothered by Kamaru for the last 15, 20 minutes.
The commentators themselves were saying it. We were saying it. We were in the fifth round. We had been talking about the next matchup for Usman. Who can touch him? Who can challenge him? We'd been talking about that for a full round. We get to a minute left. Leon Edwards lands a brilliant head kick to knock out Usman and take the title.
To set it up, he kind of feints. He feints like a right straight or a right hook. I think.
I think it was a left straight. It was a left jab or
With a
something
left
like
straight.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
He feints a left. Kamaru ducks his head down, and then Leon just throws an absolute beautiful like head kick, almost seemingly from nowhere.
It's actually, it was almost the exact same thing that Chito Vera did to Dominic Cruz last week,
Oh shit! Yeah,
which
you're
we
right.
talked about. And the MMA world exploded because nobody gave Leon a chance.
On our Discord call, there was a collective 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes of just silence.
It was like 5 minutes, but like I yelled when it happened and then didn't say anything for about 5 minutes. I
I think
couldn't.
I just kept saying, "Oh my god," for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. We were all stunned, as was the entire MMA world. And so Leon Edwards is champion now. After all the hate, all the shit talk, he's made it. And
So
he's a likable dude once like once you learn a little
he's
bit about him. He
he's
came
he's
from a
one of
really rough
those
background.
from the
Yeah,
bottom guys. Like grew up in extreme poverty in Jamaica, moved to England to start a new life. Grew up in poverty in England once they got there, and then
yeah,
just fought his way up from the bottom.
yeah.
Like
I mean, he lost his
his
dad at
story,
14,
his story is
like from a
amazing.
shooting. Yeah, it's an incredible story of resilience. And his whole thing was he wanted to prove that you could become a champion without leaving the United Kingdom. And I guess he's done it. He's done it now. So really happy for him. He seems like a really cool dude. It sounds like they're going to rematch
They
the
have
two
to.
of them.
They have to. Because
Yeah.
here's my take on it: is that, and this is I kept drawing after the whole, after the results and everything happened, after we found out that after he won and everything, and they crowned him the winner. I kept thinking in the back of my mind that this was another Amanda Nunez situation, Amanda Nunez Juliana Pena situation. It was
Right.
just a bad day at the office for Kamaru Usman.
Yeah.
He
For context, Amanda Nunes was also regarded as unstoppable, and that no one would ever beat her until one of her most random challengers, Juliana Pena, kind of unheralded
completely written off by
wrestler.
everybody.
Yep. Came to fight. They fought, and Pena knocked her out. Actually, well, I should explain. She TKO'd her. TKO means technical knockout. It means that they weren't actually knocked out, but the referee saw enough, you know, dominance from one party to step in and stop the fight. I
So
forgot
I
to actually mention that during
I,
the.
I think it was just. I'm not gonna say that Kamaru got cocky. Um, while that is something that is a very big possibility, and that people can say he got cocky, I just think he read Leon wrong. I think he read that feint wrong, or I guess he read it right or something. But I don't think and I don't want to discredit Leon Edwards. I real quick, I keep wanting to say Leon Kennedy from fucking Resident Evil. I don't know why, but I don't want to discount Leon for saying that he got lucky. But had that round gone on for 55 more seconds, he would have lost that fight.
Yep. And he looked so beat. It was one perfect head kick. Even Usman in his congratulations said, "What an amazing Hail Mary! This is why we watch sports. This is why we watch this." With the obvious, implication. Yeah, you got me on one good shot. All right.
And now the real test to prove that Leon is the champion is that now he has to defend his belt against Kamaru Usman again.
Yep.
And that I'm excited. I'm excited about that. I'm always really excited about rematches because again, this is a sport where anything can happen, and it proved that like it can happen in a split second.
Yep.
You could have the fight on the cards. The points can be in your favor, and then just one small error can completely change the landscape completely. So
Yep.
the rematch is going to be glorious.
It's going to be amazing. There are talks about it being in London, maybe at Wembley Stadium, which would be
Ooh,
incredible.
that is going to be amazing if they actually land that.
Yes. So we'll see what happens there. Congratulations to Leon, though. And
Yeah,
I
again, by no means am I discrediting Leon. He's a great fighter. I just think that for the 4 rounds that he was in, I mean, I'd wager to say even 5 rounds he was in, he was outclassed.
yeah, he lost 80% of the fight
Yeah,
handily. But and it wasn't in the momentum was all Usman. So we'll see what happens. I don't think Usman lets that happen again. Usman has one of the better coaches in the sport in Trevor Whitman, who we mentioned
I would
last
say Trevor
episode.
Whitman's 0 for 3 in title defenses right now, so we'll see what
I
that.
I'm not gonna count the Rose one against him because he gave great advice. Rose Namajunas was the former champion of the strawweight division.
He just decided
Um,
to have active listening that night.
yes, we won't talk about the Namajunas Esparza fight because that was terrible, terrible fight. But that's how Carla is champion. And yeah, so that is the lay of the land at welterweight right now. So yes, congrats to Leon. I can't wait to see that rematch because that is the trend. They usually do immediate rematches to complete trilogies nowadays. Because they
It is
actually
a
fought each
good
other a long
gauge.
time ago, and Usman won.
It's a good gauge to prove who actually is the winner. Like again, in a sport where anything can happen, you need a last fight, a bookend to this entire thing to actually say who's on top.
Exactly.
So
Well, except when there isn't, such as Figueiredo versus Marino 4. But we'll
uh,
talk about that a
that
little
entire
later.
division's a train wreck.
There was a way. Look, if Pantoja wasn't hurt, it would have been fine. But we'll talk about this later. This is a little off topic. So to continue through our recap, the co-main at UFC 278 was Paulo Costa versus Luke Rockhold, the buff model fight, like I mentioned last time, and it was
This is a
one of
fight
the
that
weirder fights I've ever seen.
this is a fight that I was oddly I was actually more excited about this fight than I was the main event. Oddly
Well,
enough,
did it deliver?
it delivered in spades.
You think so?
Um,
Really? It was
I think it did because here's the thing, and I dunked on Luke Rockhold pretty hard the last episode, and here's the reason why. Let's take a trip back to early 2010s, mid 2010s, like 2015 ish. Yeah,
yeah.
Luke Rockhold. He in his rise to fame, he was the Strikeforce champion in dominant fashion. He has one of the best not the best stand up game, but he has very dominant stand up game. His kicks are massive. He knows how to throw a strike, but his ground game is also like chef's kiss. His grappling jiu-jitsu is amazing. Problem with Luke Rockhold is that he didn't he has this like I don't even know. He comes off as this cocky, arrogant person who isn't likable. He says the weirdest things. I think it's like a little bit of social anxiety.
I think it wasn't his
Um
nickname the Last Samurai or something like that.
Unofficially his nickname was the Last Samurai. He in a classic bit sound grab from his fight against Michael Bisping for his second fight. He has this ability just to say a lot of things but mean nothing at the same time, and that comes across as like arrogant and haughty and just pretentious. I think that's the word I'm looking for, is pretentious.
Pretentious is a good word for
He's
him.
a very and he it doesn't help that he's also a very good looking dude. He modeled for like Ralph Lauren
Mm,
for a while. So
yeah.
he's not likable. He's just not a likable dude.
Would you say he was the Tom Brady of MMA around that time?
Yeah, yeah,
That's a
easily.
good comparable.
He has the
Okay.
skill to back it up, but he's not relatable. He's not likable. Everything he says, you roll your eyes completely. I remember um, watching one of his press conferences back in the day, and I remember just rolling my eyes so badly I saw my brain for a second. Because he's just again he's just not fun. He's a dick.
Yeah, but I mean, this week he came in and he was very different. I mean, he seemed a lot more grounded. He was actually making sense with what he was trying to say.
Very
Um,
clairvoyant.
yeah, and he had real gripes that he raised about fighter healthcare, fighter pay. You know, he made a lot of really good points, and he seemed like a really grounded dude.
I don't
Um,
want to delve
it's
too
his
much. I
first fight
mean,
in 3 years here as well.
so I was kind of doing some research on him, and this is all like public knowledge. The last several years for him has been like really really brutal. He had like staph infection. He like lost his dad, I think, recently. He he had a he had to him and his wife had an abortion. So there's a lot of personal things that are just like weighing on his chest. And him coming to this fight, I think he was more focused than ever. Now, come fight day, and he's going against Paulo Costa, who is a monster of a man. Like you said, he walks around at what, like 220
Or higher.
or higher than that. I mean, he's had issues in the past by cutting weight and making weight. Um, almost to a point where Dana White, the owner and the president of
Not
UFC,
really the owner. He's
he's the
president
president.
of UFC. He has a lot of.
He unofficially kind of like chided that he may ban him from the middleweight division because he's holding it up, but not making weight. Blah blah blah. So him coming into this fight against Luke Rockhold, I wanted to see how this would play out because again, Paul's a monster of a man, and I knew for a fact that Luke Rockhold was gonna get trounced. And the cynic side of me was just like, oh yeah, finally I get to see this asshole, this pretentious douchebag get, laid out. But everything that happened in that fight was almost the complete opposite. Yeah, Luke Rockhold got absolutely demolished, but I've never seen more heart, more grit in a fighter ever.
Just more
It's,
more nasty, you know?
it
Like
was a dirty, gritty fight. Like it was. There's
it was absolutely insane to watch. Like Rockhold ran out of energy about a minute in. Like hands on his knees, panting, ran out of energy. You never see that in
he
MMA, not
got
in
clocked
UFC.
in the face. I think they said he broke his nose in the first like 3 minutes of the fight. So he automatically he is not able to breathe correctly. He's also fighting at altitude. Salt Lake City is a very high city. So those things combined, it is taking the win out of sales tenfold. And there was so many points where I thought he was either just going to tap out, give up, his coach is going to throw the towel, but he kept going and going and going.
And this is a
Um,
fight we wrote off as being we came into this fight saying want to see a dead body. We wrote this off as a knockout. For Costa. In fact, I'm pretty sure my prediction last week verbatim was Costa by beheading at some point. And they went to decision.
Luke
Rockhold lost by
Rockhold
decision.
just didn't give up. He kept throwing these massive kicks. I think it was 4 straight body kicks in a row unanswered. In like the second round, I want to say.
Mhm.
It just completely sapping his energy, but he kept going. He kept throwing these massive like overhands. He at one point, actually multiple times, he would just say "fuck you," throws a massive overhand and just clocks Costa in the face.
Overhand being a strike.
Yeah,
It's isn't it when you like duck down and kind of throw it over your
pretty
shoulders?
much, yeah.
Kind of not like over your shoulder. It's like kind of a looping strike. I don't know how to. I'm not good at
And
strike terminology.
I think this fight for Luke, I think this was almost an exorcism of sorts of his demons. I think he wasn't fighting the way he was fighting. He wasn't fighting Costa. He was fighting himself.
Mhm.
He was trying to prove to himself that he could do this.
Yeah. And
And
and eventually, I mean, he made it to the decision. He in the last dying seconds of the fight, as an act of defiance, he was bleeding a lot. He was able to get on top. He was able to reverse position on Costa, who had him wrestled on the ground, and get on top. And instead of trying to pound away for trying to get a finish, trying to get a TKO, um, he ducks forward and he rubs the blood on his face all over Paulo
almost as an
Costa's face,
act
which
of
I've never seen.
defiance.
Yep. I've
It
never seen
was
anything like that in UFC. It was
it was
gross as all
amazing and gross at the same time. It was like almost out of a movie.
Mhm.
It had like all the makings of like a cinematic like last fight scene from like a movie, and it 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 made me respect Luke a lot, which is something that I don't think I would have said that like 5, 10 years earlier.
Maybe 5, 10 weeks earlier.
Yeah, but
5,
I
10
mean,
days before media coverage?
yeah, I was again, I was dunking on him pretty hard. Then the media coverage was like, all right, I kept saying this is the weirdest timeline, and the fact that I am actually agreeing with Luke
Mhm.
Rockhold on something.
Yep. Yep. And yeah, so in the end, Costa wins. Rockhold retires after the match. He gives a good send off speech. Basically said, "My heart's not in this anymore. Fuck, I'm old." You know.
Which
Um,
I think is the noble way to go. He went out on a shield. He went out the way he wanted to go,
yeah.
not getting knocked out, but kind of just again as an act of defiance,
You know.
just kind of going out on a shield, man. Like again, I
Yeah.
respect that.
He went out. He went. He made it to the end of the fight. Ended on top. And he gave it his all. And so yeah, respect to Luke.
It's just interesting. We're for me, we're at that time where a lot of the fighters I grew up watching are slowly kind of petering out. Um, this sport has you have a shelf life when you've been
Mhm.
fighting for that long, and a lot of the expiration dates for these fighters are coming up.
Yeah,
It's
and even
something that I
yeah.
don't like to say, but it's just the way it is.
I mean,
This is
it reminds me of when I was a baseball fan. All my childhood heroes. I was a Yankees fan. Were retiring Derek Jeter, Andy Pettitte, Mariano Rivera, Jorge Posada. They were all
yeah.
retiring one by one. Um, and it's sort of like that. And in fact, we have another one. We have another person to talk about. Who is from from the glory days of the early 2000s, who might be on his way out. In Jose Aldo, who fought directly before Luke Rockhold. He fought Rob Dvalishvili um, in kind of a high profile contender fight, um, where the whole question, like we were debating last episode, was um, Jose's stellar takedown defense versus Marab's incredible volume wrestling,
Relentless.
nonstop takedowns. And to Aldo's credit, his takedown defense was incredible. I think Marab went 1 for 16 or 17 on takedowns,
Something like
which
that,
is the
yeah.
worst showing he's ever done um, in his whole UFC career. Um, and so Aldo looked great. It's just that he just got suffocated by Marab, and therefore Marab won by decision. And it came out later, I think only today or yesterday, that Marab and Aldo they talked to each other after the fight for a long time, and apparently Marab said that Aldo told him that that was his last fight, and if Aldo's retiring, that's another very very big name
I wanna get a source for that
for sure.
because at this point, it's kinda hearsay. There isn't anyone to corroborate that, so it could be a case of he said, she said. Um, if he does retire, I think it's a good point to retire. He doesn't have anything else to prove. He is one of the best, if not I think he's one of the best fighters of all time.
He's
I
in the
love
conversation for greatest fighter of all time, which is
yeah.
saying a lot.
Again, I'm not mad if he retires. I think it's a good point because the more you keep fighting, especially at his age and how many fights he's been, you're doing so much to your body that it's just gonna give up, and no one wants to see that.
Yeah, the classic warning example that brought up is that of BJ Penn, former lightweight champion UFC, who legend. He was incredible in his prime, but he just kept fighting and fighting and fighting, and when he was very clearly past it, and he lost what 8 or 9 straight,
Something like
and
that, yeah.
got cut, and then got in a bar fight and lost that to a random bar patron.
It's
Um, it's sad, you know, and
you
I
you
think
you
it's
die the
all those little
hero. You either die the hero, or live long enough to become the villain, like, and the villain just being just dead.
yeah, basically.
Like the longer you go, the toll it's gonna take on your body, and you're not gonna have a sustainable lifestyle afterwards.
It's either you retire from the sport or the sport retires you. There's no
Yeah,
choice in the matter. And
especially in a sport
if
where the young eat the old.
exactly. Like and there are some who defy the odds, like even Aldo, um, fighting this long. He's dropped down 2 weight classes since his debut, I think. Um, like he's really stretched every last bit out of his career. Um, so if this is the end for him, I think it's a good point. It reminds me again of Mariano Rivera, who retired not because he couldn't cut it anymore, but because he wanted to, and he was comfortable with that. So,
Real quick, because this just came down the pipeline. I was surfing Twitter. So we said that Luke Rockhold retired. Like he verbally retired in the octagon after the fight was ended. Like he told during the post fight interview that he's he's done. But that's always like kind of like, all right, well we'll see what happens. Like you say a lot of things when you're emotional, but he actually just notified the UFC officially as of like an hour ago that he's officially done. So that's
yep,
something. That's
yep,
again, it's hard to
former
see
champion.
like it's hard
Yeah,
to see people that you grew up with. Even if I didn't like him, it's hard to see people you grew up with, you know, quit. But I think it's for the right reasons. Again, it's a longevity game.
yeah, yeah. No, and yeah, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Maybe he retire. Maybe he retires. Maybe he does a fight. The fight that a lot of people are pitching is him versus Dominic Cruz, or Aldo versus Dominic
All
Cruz.
over. Okay.
Both two legends at the end of their careers, or close to the end of their careers in the beginning, certainly, who may want to do a legacy fight. We'll see if that comes. I think that would be a very fun fight, but I don't see another way forward for either right now. So other than retirement. So we'll see. As for Marab, Dana White was not a fan of his
Oh, he
wrestling,
was
so
seething.
he's not going to be. Yeah, something tells me he's not going to be one of the ones next up in line to fight for the title, especially because Marab is training partners with and best friends with Aljamain Sterling, and has said repeatedly, despite seemingly every reporter asking him about this every time he gets interviewed. What happens if you climb the ranks high enough to challenge Aljamain? He said he will not fight Aljamain Sterling. So he's not really in the title conversation anyway because of. Um, and like first of all, I hope I have friends like Marab and Aljamain are friends. Like that sounds awesome. Like good for them. I'm glad they're so tight. And Marab has said actually in the past that he might drop down to flyweight if Aljamain remains champion. So we'll see.
I wonder how he would do with that weight cut because he's kind of a big dude for his like size.
True, but he's a little short, so he could do
That's
it
true.
potentially. So we'll see. But yeah, but safe to say he's not going to be entered in the hat of potential next bantamweight challengers. So I guess we'll turn our heads to Cheeto Vera, and then the winner of Yan versus O'Malley, and the winner of Sandhagen versus Yadong. I don't think Yadong gets it if he wins, but we discussed this on episode 1, I think. Um, but yeah, so bantamweight, great division, super deep, very exciting. Um, we'll have plenty to say about it later. Um, as for some quick hits for the rest of the card, because I've kind of drawn this out a little bit, um, one of the big common threads of this fight was that this UFC 278 took place in Salt Lake City, and the altitude really affected almost everybody on the card. Like the main eventers, they showed up early to acclimate to the climate, and Usman actually, in fact, trains in Colorado at elevation, um, so he's used to it. However, a lot of the fighters coming up from sea level to fight in Salt Lake City really ran out of energy very quickly. Got short of breath, lost energy,
It
and that
was
was a
like a
really common
lot of
thread
them.
on the
Yeah.
card. Yeah, and it actually led to probably in part a a loss for one of the most exciting prospects on the card, Alexander Romanov, who fought Marcin Tybura at heavyweight and lost a pretty controversial. Well, didn't lose. He drew. No, no, no. Sorry, no, he
No,
did lose.
he
He
lose, yeah.
lost in a very controversial decision against Tybura, 2 rounds to 1. A lot of people are annoyed about that though, because Romanov was previously undefeated and he had a lot of hype behind him. We hyped him in episode 1 and episode 2. And in round 1, the reason people are so mad is because in round 1, Romanov, who was fresh, was dominant. He was literally, quite literally, throwing Tybura around, suplexing him around the ring.
It was really entertaining to watch, though.
It was amazing. These are Tybura is like 250-pound man, and Romanov weighed like 20 pounds less than him. It was incredible, and Tybura did not land a single strike the entire first round, and the and in the other 2 rounds, Romanov kind of ran out of energy, and Tybura, being kind of the more experienced veteran, was able to get back into the fight and win those rounds. I suppose we should talk about scoring because that's what's making this controversial. The
This is
way,
definitely your wheelhouse. You know more about the score than I do.
yeah, the rule set verbatim or near verbatim, as much as I remember it, is that it's a 10-point must system, meaning that the winner of the round is awarded 10 points um, per round, and then the opponent gets 9 points or fewer, depending on a couple of criteria: effective striking and grappling, then aggression, then octagon control, in that order. That's the verbatim definition of the scoring. So usually how that goes is that if a fighter loses a close round, or relatively close round, like our standard round, like one fighter does a little better than the other, it will go 10 points to the winning fighter, 9 points to the losing fighter. If a round is exceedingly one-sided, where one fighter dominates the other fighter, usually that's given as 10 points to the winning fighter, 8 points to the losing fighter to show that dominance. And so what happened here? There are 3 rounds in a regular fight. There are 5 in a main event fight, or a championship fight. Is that there are 3 judges at Octagon side, and they all, according to how they see it, according to those criteria, decide on scores, decide on which fighter won and which fighter and how and how much they won each round. Really, most of the time it's 10-9s, but sometimes you get a 10-8. There have even been a couple
Every
wins
now and
given.
then you get 10-8, yeah.
Yep. But 10-8s are not as common as a lot of people feel they should be. And that's what caused the issue here. When the scorecards were read out, a lot of people, in fact, 80% of fans who, and almost the entirety of media, people scoring whose cards do not matter, um, scored round 1 as a 10-8 for Romanov, given that Tybura was absolutely dominated um, and put up nothing in return. Um, but 2 of the 3 judges scored round 1 10-9 for Romanov rather than 10-8. And so since Tybura won rounds 2 and 3, that's 10-9 and 10-9 respectively, that led to a 29-28 for Tybura. The third judge scored the first round 10-8 and then 10-9, 10-9 Tybura, which led to 28-28, which would a draw. But since these judges were apparently so hesitant to give out 10-8s, it cost Romanov the fight
Yep.
and his undefeated record. And a lot of people are angry about that. I'm a little bit annoyed about it, honestly, because if it's my opinion that Romanov was literally throwing him around, and there was not a
Straight up
single strike,
ragdolling.
not a single strike found its way back. No wrestling, nothing. It was one-way traffic. It was as one-way traffic as a round gets. How can you not score that at 10-8? How can you not score that at 10-8? I don't see any logical reason other than judges don't know what a 10-8 is.
I was like, because
And
a lot of people don't realize that the judges they're not versed in MMA and mixed martial arts. They're like what, boxing
they're
judges.
boxing judges usually doing this on the side.
So that's all you need to know, really.
Yeah. And judging had been better since they did a seminar about judging criteria recently. And but I mentioned last week the when I was talking about the Martin Budai, Lukasz Paszewski robbery. This is what I'm talking about. Judging decisions. Um, that was like the one kind of dodgy decision, but that was kind of like whatever. This is a big, this is a high profile one and a very clear cut one. Because a lot of the time, people will see a close fight scored differently than now how they would have scored it and say, "Oh, that's a robbery." That's not a robbery. I might disagree about how bouts are scored, um, but sometimes you can see it for another fighter. This is not one I could see as a Tibura win. Not at all. Granted, I will also say there's no way I can see this as a Romanov win either. This is a clear cut draw in but I'm just some guy. So
Judging judging's always been honestly a hot mess. Like even with like the new seminars they're doing, it's just which sucks because it really discredits like a fighter and it really weighs on their self confidence and just kind
and
of
not only that,
disillusions them.
it directly affects their pay.
Oh,
Um,
for sure, yeah.
they lose out half their pay usually. If you don't like a lot of fighter contracts, which I mentioned last week, are broken into a portion given to show up and a portion given to win. If you get robbed on the scorecards, you're getting robbed of half your pay. That's the long and short of it. So it has really and that affects future contract negotiations, like I mentioned to Angela Hill, where she lost two split decisions that personally I scored for her, and so she's probably getting paid a lot less because her record is worse. It directly affects the fighters, so that's why this is so important and why I make such a stink about it. Romanov should be fine because everyone understands it was probably just because of the altitude and kind of going up a level, and he'll rebound. He's still
Oh, for
an amazing
sure.
prospect.
He's a stud.
I see big things for him, but this is a stain on that record, unfortunately, that I don't think he deserves. So
And it's
that's
something
the
he has
decision.
to like live with too. Like there's no way to like there's no way to challenge it or to contest it. It's just something that he has to live with, which is a shame.
Exactly. And yes, so it's whatever. What can you do? I mean, we're just two guys on the internet
Shit,
talking
man.
about MMA, but
I'm just a dog on
that's
the
that's
internet.
my yep, exact. And yes, so that's how we do it. We ball.
Fuck
Um,
it, we ball.
so a couple other quick hits before I move on from 278. We had one other very strange fight.
Yeah,
Which
let's discuss this one actually.
this one ended in a split draw, which are incredibly rare. A split draw is where one judge scored it for one fighter, another judge scored it for the other fighter, and the third judge scored it a draw. You almost never ever see that. And the reason that happened is because of a point deduction that happened.
so yeah, so what ended up happening was um Saldana got a really good knockdown. He knocked him down pretty good.
Yeah.
It was a
This was
stiff.
yeah. This
It was
was
like it was
Sean Woodson versus Luis
yeah,
Saldana
yeah, I meant to
at
say that.
lightweight, featherweight,
Featherweight.
featherweight. I think. Yeah, featherweight,
Um
145 pounds.
Saldana had a really nice like I think like a stiff jab. Just kind of bops him on the chin. Woodson goes down. And then as Woodson's getting up, Saldana like kind of showboats a bit and then runs up and knees him in the face.
While he's
For
sitting
those
down.
for those who aren't versed or aren't aware, in the rule set you aren't allowed to knee an opponent. You're not allowed to knee a down opponent. So down opponent means anyone who's on the ground, either butt on the ground, knees on the ground, or hands on the ground. Um, and straight up, it wasn't accidental. There was a full wind up and everything,
Not a
and
full
it's
windup, but there was a noticeable windup,
there was a noticeable wind up. And
which it
this
was brutal
this
though. Brutal.
decision it's just this lack of fighter IQ and just awareness, I think, cost him a victory.
Yep.
It's
All he had to do was punch him one more time. That would have
he
been
could
it.
have followed up, and
Woodson
this
was
is me
gone.
like this is me like Monday morning cornering. He could have finished up a ground and pound and would have just walked away as a winner
Mhm.
easily.
And
But
we'd be talking about him. We'd be talking about Luis Saldana squashing a prospect I identified last week as being one to watch in pretty dominant fashion. But nope. Now we talk about this instead.
just a temporary lapse in judgment.
And then Woodson had one too, but I mean, he was probably concussed, so I don't blame him. He could have, justifiably said, "No, I'm not fighting anymore. I just got concussed with an illegal knee," and won the fight. But he said, "No, no, I'm going to keep going." And we're like, What are you doing, Woodson? What are you doing?"
I want to say that a lot of fighters took the Aljamain Sterling Pietro Yan situation. I want to say they saw that and said, for one reason or another, never again.
Yeah,
For background, Aljamain Sterling or Pietro Yan need Aljamain Sterling when Sterling's hands were on the ground,
yeah.
which is considered.
During Sterling's title challenge, this is the way
Yep.
Aljamain Sterling became champion. He later defended it in a rematch against Jan and won. So a lot for a long time. People were saying he's an
But I
illegitimate
think
champ.
that situation set a precedent for a lot of people. And you can argue if Sterling was right or wrong. It can go both ways. That's a
I think he was
Only
genuinely
Sterling knows that
concussed. I
question.
don't think he played it up as much as people said that he did.
Only he knows that answer. We
I
can only
guess so.
speculate. But I think a lot of people saw the situation and were just like, "No, I'm just gonna keep fighting."
Yeah, I'm biased. He's my boy. He's from New York, So
But also, I think a lot of people also saw and the same situation happened several years back with Anthony Smith and John Jones. Jones threw a knee to a down opponent. To Anthony Smith was downed, and Anthony kept fighting. And it's just it's a
and
fighter
lost.
mentality. Yeah, he lost. I think it's a fighter mentality thing though. They a lot of people they don't want the easy way out. I think that's just a testament to someone's character, but that's also like at the detriment of them winning or losing. It goes both ways.
Yep. Yeah, so that's that. Woodson, to his credit, rebounded a little bit and won a round. It's hard to say who won rounds. Basically, what happened is they deducted a point, which they'll do for a severe enough foul, which takes a point off um, the round. So, like, if he would have won 10-9 in a round, that round is now 9-9. It wipes out, or actually,
So it
well,
does
that round
quite a bit.
we were talking about that round being a 10-8, so that would have made it a 9-8. So the scoring was all sorts of weird for this one.
I before the Luke Rockhold fight, I was like, man, this is a fucking crazy fight. This is everything's all screwed up and weird. And then the Luke Rockhold fight happened. I'm like, that was nothing compared to this fight.
Exactly. Yep. So yeah, so that's that situation, and then a couple of more brief spotlights before I wrap this up. I know I keep trying to wrap it up, but getting distracted. Amir Albazi, who I spotlighted last week, put on a really dominant performance um, and submitted Francisco Figueiredo very quickly. He's definitely earned,
Who's a great grappler, by the way.
yeah, black belt in jiu-jitsu. And Abazi said, "Yeah, keep throwing these black belts at me. I'll keep submitting them all," which is just such a cool
It's
line.
such a baller move.
Yep. And so I think he's going to fight up very soon. He looked quite good. Tyson Pedro, as everybody expected, KO'd Harry Hunsucker very quickly.
It was
They're
like
definitely showing
minute and a half.
it was short. I don't remember if it was maybe like a couple minutes. It was not
Just
long.
a beautiful body kick.
Yep. And yeah, and Hunsucker, who like I said, is not UFC level, folded immediately. Um, that so Pedro looks quite good. Um, and I'm
I see
excited to see
big
what
things for
comes
Tyson
next.
Pedro at the rate he's going. If they give him more like even with experienced fighters, I think he has what it takes to kind of roll with them.
Yep. No, I mean, he's coming back from injury. He's definitely an unknown quantity, and this doesn't really give his opponents much more tape on him.
He's also with
So,
City Kickboxing, who's been producing killers recently. So
right. City Kickboxing being where Alexander Volkanovski and Israel Adesanya train, among many, many talented others.
yeah, Kakar
Um,
France,
yep, yep,
Riddell. Yeah, it's
yep,
it's it's a good it's a great camp.
yeah. So we'll see what happens with Pedro. He impressed me as a first time viewer. So we'll see where he goes. And then Lucia Podolova, who I also spotlighted briefly last week, put a really good TKO on Wu Yanan with some great elbows. The last two people I'm spotlighting had some really great elbow ground and pound. Ground and pound being when a fighter is on top of another fighter on the ground,
And just
they'll start throwing
throwing
strikes down at
strikes.
the fighter to try and end the fight. So if we say ground and pound, that's what that means. And Pudilova put some great elbows on Yanan, got the stoppage. Apparently, she's won 6 straight now since she was originally cut from the UFC. So excited to see where she goes.
It's
And
always
then,
fun seeing
yeah,
fighters who've gotten cut by the promotion work their way back up.
I always root for those guys because it's so
Yeah,
hard to get back.
case in
It's so
point,
hard.
like one of my favorite fighters, Anthony Smith. I mean, he had a shot at the UFC years and years ago. Now I think about it, kind of fizzled out. Didn't really produce. Went back to the regional scene for like 2 or 3 years, actually longer than that. I want to
Went to
say,
regionals, went to Bellator. I think he was on Strike Force.
and then came back to the UFC and just did work. I mean, got a championship shot, lost, but I mean, getting cut from promotion, getting cut from the UFC, no less, and then fighting kind of no name shows, and then coming back to the UFC, and then working your way up to a title shot. That's huge.
Absolutely,
That is like
absolutely.
personal growth to another level.
Yep. And I'm not on the same level. Another one of my favorite fighters, Julian Erosa, had the same thing happen to him. Had an unimpressive three fight stint in the UFC, got cut, fought on the regionals, made it back, and he just puts on nothing but exciting fights these days. I can't wait to talk about him when he's fighting, I think, on UFC 279 next month. So, and then finally, Victor Altamirano, who looks like he's 17. He looks so young. Who I wrote off really as kind of a nothing prospect. Fought um, in the opener. And
Yeah, this is one of the fights that I missed because I was at work.
yeah, no, you're good. And he looked really out of his depth about a minute in, but he turned it around and dropped some nasty elbows on Daniel da Silva, his opponent. He got the stoppage, and honestly, that showed me that he's got some promise. I'd like to see where
Fun
he goes from here. I don't know if
fun
he's going to be that
fact.
good, but yeah,
Fun fact about that fight. I don't know if it's a fun fact. The the way it ended, I watched the highlights when I got home. It the ref kind of let it kept going for a little bit longer than it should, if I remember
yeah,
correctly.
yeah, yeah. It was a late stoppage. I
It
think.
was a very late stoppage in terms of like what the damage that was done.
I
And
don't know about very late, but definitely like late. You
yeah.
know,
But we didn't see I mean, did you see that ref the rest of the fight night or the
I
rest of
don't
the
think
card?
he. I think he got pulled.
I think he got pulled, yeah, because they mentioned that another ref was like kind of doing double duty.
He
And
did a
the
back to
promotion
back, which you never ever see.
and the promotion will do this if they deem something as a bad stoppage on that level. Where it's like not a bad stoppage in terms of like public opinion, but when a fighter is absolutely getting pieced up for a good like 10 seconds after the damage is done and keep just keeps like eating punches and hits, there's a judgment call there, and the ref didn't take it. So I think they ended up pulling that ref for the rest of the night.
Yeah, the official criteria for a TKO is that a referee does not think the fighter is doing enough to intelligently defend themselves. Like if you're just covering your face and not moving, that's not intelligent defense. That's just
Yeah,
defense.
you need to be showing the ref that you're trying to get your way out of that situation, that you're fighting back, that you're actively taking measures to not get beat up anymore of that in that
Exactly.
scale.
Yep. And not only showing that you are doing that, showing that you can do that. Because there's a lot of people who try, but are clearly not getting out of the situation they're stuck in. You know, and
Right.
that's when the referee needs to save themselves. So, anyway, so that was a bit of a blemish on that fight, but Victor Altamirano, um, I'm curious to see where he goes from here. I mean, he's a little bit of a low level fighter, but we'll see. He seems exciting. So that's 278. that's our that's that.
It was a fun card. I was thoroughly impressed with it.
Yeah, for sure. No, it was good. I mean, usually I walk away from these pay-per-views being disappointed with them, being like, why did I stay up this late and watch this many fights? Just a predictable main event, because that's what happens sometimes in title fights or in big fights. Um, Sometimes they really do go how you think they would, and I
There's
thought I
a
was going to be like that at the end of this, but then Leon Edwards and his left shin decided to change that. So
there's a precedent recently, and I don't know if it's this could be speculation. Personal opinion though is that a lot of these championship fights, it's very safe. It's one fighter doing not the absolute minimum, but doing enough that they can get by and win it on the points. And at least from when I started watching, like back in the day, back to kind of age myself here, like pay-per-view fights and championship fights were just brawls. It was high action 9 times out of 10. But like recently, I've noticed that a lot of the fights are just kind of like safe, which again, you gotta do what you gotta do. But it's nice to be able to see exciting fights nowadays.
yeah, like
And I could be
what
talking out of my ass here, and if people want to, lambast me for that, hey, I'm I'm for it. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I mean, there's a debate to be had. I mean, it's not all like that. I mean, like, Alexander Volkanovski and Israel Adesanya, who I mentioned earlier, are really good contrasts in this. They train at the same gym. They're both dominant champions. They're both high in the pound for pound rankings. But people seem to like Volkanovski a lot better because he keeps his fights he usually is in very exciting fights, while Adesanya is very good at what he does, which is keeping distance and striking from really only where he can land, because he's an incredible kickboxer. But people don't like watching his fights anymore because he just kind of stands at a distance and
it's
pokes people
safe.
for a while. Yeah, exactly.
But
So
so it's nice to see, and it's nice to see. Uh, not gonna say it's resurgence of action because it's a little bit too early to tell, but just eventful stuff.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
like again, my jaw was on the ground when Usman got dropped. I don't think I've ever been that. I haven't been that surprised. Um, Probably since the Holly Holm fight, the Holly Holm
The
Ronda
fight
Rousey
where Ronda
fight.
Rousey
Yeah,
lost her championship out of nowhere.
I haven't been that thoroughly surprised in a while, so it was nice to see that. I kept I asked my friend if that's the best head kick, and we're still debating if the Holly Holm head kick was better or not. There's a point to be had for both, but
I mean, yeah, I think you're kind of, if you're picking the best head kick in UFC history, you're picking between this one, you're picking between Holly Holm over Ronda Rousey, and you're probably picking just based on how nice it was for these two. Uh, Joaquin Buckley on Impa Kasanganai, and
the one where he caught it,
eh, yes,
I said I caught it, and then he
which is
just like a
just
Tekken move.
absurd. Yeah, the absurd jumping spinning. Like, that's one where, if you haven't seen that knockout, it's the one knockout I would show anyone, which displaced the other one that I'm about to say, which used to be that, which was Edson Barboza on Terry Edom. Um,
That was a great
just
head kick.
the quintessential, which it was the quintessential UFC knockout for years and years and years.
They still replay that clip every time Edson Barboza's name gets tossed in a discussion.
Yep, as they should. It's legendary. But yeah, so there are it's in the if it's joining that short list, um, that's pretty incredible. Also, one that I think is underappreciated, maybe because I'm not an older fight fan, but Gabriel Gonzaga, head kicking
Where he
the
head
head
kicked
kick
Crow
guy
Cop.
himself,
Oh
Mirko
man.
Krokop, the head kick specialist, was
That hurt to watch.
I mean, yeah, but like, it's incredible. Like, that's one of the highlights that always stuck with me. I was watching highlights before I started watching. I was like, wow, that's pretty incredible. I never got the context of it before I started watching, which was that Crow Cop was this incredible head kick specialist from Pride,
Right
um,
leg hospital, left leg cemetery.
which is that the most badass motto a fighter's ever had?
Terrifying. That is
Yeah,
straight just terrifying.
yeah,
Oh, do you know real quick? Do you know how Crow Cop got his name?
Yeah, he was Croatian Special Forces cop. Yeah,
He was like a counterterrorism like commando, which is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Mirko Krok, we'll definitely chat about Pride at some point.
I want to do an episode further down the road about just pride fights.
Yep, I'd be down. I'd be down.
The golden years, man.
Yep, I'll have to watch some of those still. I'm still catching up. But yeah, so lots to yeah, so lots there. There's so much. There's so much. Pride was insane. So
Surprisingly enough, like mixed martial arts, I guess at least organized mixed martial arts, it is a relatively new sport.
yeah, no,
In
it's
terms
only
of like
really been around. Uh,
20, almost 20, 25 years,
I didn't it start in the early '90s, mid
something like that.
'90s.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we're looking at a quarter century,
which
roundabout.
is like infant status in terms of like televised sports.
Like the NBA, that's an infant league. Like this, and the UFC is way younger than that. So it's really crazy how much it's grown since then. Now there have been precursors to this, and there's actually back in the old or ancient Greek Olympics, there was an event called pancration, which was kind of akin to modern MMA.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
oh man, that would have been fun to watch.
they still do pancration tournaments these
No,
days.
I'm
It's still
talking
a thing.
like time travel
Oh,
back in
back
like
then,
ancient Greece days
that
to
would
watch
be
those dudes fight.
that would
Like
be incredible. In the nude, probably as well. That's what they usually.
those definitely natty because steroids weren't really a thing. So
Yep. Right. If we joke about fighters being natty, by the way, natty being natural, because there's like if we're saying a fighter is natty, it means they're incredibly jacked, but also they've never tested positive for steroids.
surprisingly clean on steroids,
Yeah, which is there's a debate:
shockingly
are they
clean.
actually that clean, or are they just really good at doing it?
It's like a backhanded comment.
Exactly. Like we were calling Paulo Costas the most natty guy in the UFC. That's what we're talking about.
A dude who gets drug tested by USADA every freaking month.
More than just every freaking month, like every few weeks, it seems like. No, he's clean though. So anyway,
Yeah, okay.
so one more thing going forward, that caught our eye after the fights was that a really interesting fight was announced for the future, which is Tony Ferguson versus Jingliang at welterweight. Um, Now that's weird for a lot of reasons. Um, we'll start with Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson is a former interim lightweight champion. Um, Once had an incredible 11 fight win streak. Was one of the most
Absolute
dominant fighters.
tear of a streak, going through killers too.
Yeah, he was one of the most dominant fighters in the promotion in the world, and he was so offbeat. He's a very he definitely marches to the beat of his own drum. He's
He
definitely a
doesn't have an
character.
official fight camp or team really. He just kind of trains with just a couple of his friends and like close partners, which is unheard of.
Yeah, he's very eclectic. He says a lot of weird things, but he was very very good, and they kept matching him up to fight the champion at the time, but it fell apart 5 separate times.
The most
Um,
cursed fight in all of sports history, in my opinion.
yeah, no, I mean and every single time it would be cursed in some other crazy way. Some other crazy thing would happen to
Like who
lead
trips on
to.
a wire?
Yeah, he tripped on a wire and tore and hurt his knee and couldn't fight. Um, the fifth time they scheduled, a pandemic happened.
you
Like,
know, and, you know, a global crisis happened.
yeah, so they eventually gave up on that fight. They're never going to do it just because they don't want to risk the end of the universe as we know it. Which honestly, you know what? I don't agree with Dana White on many things, but I think this fight is doomed.
That was
Anyways,
fair. That's a fair assessment.
so Tony was on the shelf for a long time waiting for this fight, and eventually it just didn't happen. So he went and fought a contender, Justin Gaethje, former interim champion in his own right. Only problem is that he was interim champion after demolishing Tony. Um, in the first UFC main event I ever watched was Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje, and I heard all these stories about Tony Ferguson being the boogeyman,
The
El
boogeyman.
Kakui.
His nickname is literally the boogeyman.
Yep. It's like being this crazy, unstoppable guy, and he gets pieced up by Gaethje. Um, and this was the start of Gaethje's kind of like going from just being a fun fighter to being a fun fighter who's also very good. Because he
I think
started
just
training with Trevor Whitman.
technical. I think
Yeah,
technical and strategic is the right word.
exactly. Yeah, because Gaethje used to be a guy who would just mindlessly go into wars with people.
Like
Uh,
rolling thunder kicks were like part of his like regular repertoire, which rolling thunder kick is essentially just a front flip.
yeah, front foot kick, which is ridiculous.
That was like a regular weapon that he would use. Like, come on.
Yeah, no, so yeah, like from there, people were really worried about Tony because he is otherworldly tough, but that works to his. He's one of those. He's too tough for his own good fighters because he was getting beat up. He would just not get KO'd. The fight wasn't. He didn't even get knocked out to end the fight. He got TKO'd standing. Standing. He didn't even fall. He
And
was like
so,
he was
and
out of it. He like then the ref, even Herb Dean, one of the most well-known refs for good and bad reasons, um, who is known to stop fights rather late. Even he stepped in and stopped it. So, and then so began a long decline for Tony, where he fought really high profile fighters and kept losing in just brutal ways. I mean, he lost the decision to Charles Oliveira, where he got armbarred at the end of a round and just a ridiculous arm. I can't believe he did
I've
not tap
put
out
people in arm bars. I've had arm bars put on me. I've never seen a man's arm go that angle before and not
it,
submit
or break.
or break. Yeah.
Yeah, no, like and
That's a testament to how tough and how honestly how insane he is.
yeah, no, because like he said afterward when asked why he didn't tap, and I'm not quoting, but I'm paraphrasing. I just thought about my son's thumb and how it's double jointed, and so if my son's thumb can be double jointed, my elbow could also be double jointed, and so I didn't tap.
That's the kind of
That's the
mindset. That's the mindset this dude has.
Yep,
It's insane. It's otherworldly, really.
yep, and and then aside from that, he fought Michael Chandler, um, former title challenger, former Bellator champion, got viciously head kicked and knocked out cold, which never happens to him.
I've never seen Tony Ferguson face plant onto the canvas like that. It actually it physically hurt me. Were you there watching the fight with us?
Yeah,
Yeah, I was almost like crying and screaming because it's Tony Ferguson's always been one of my favorite fighters. He's his as a jiu-jitsu artist, his jiu-jitsu is amazing. It is so clean and so technical. So naturally, if you haven't noticed, I'm a grappler and jiu-jitsu artist. So it was like someone I really look up to. But seeing him get absolutely laid out like that, like it hurt me. Like it was just sad to watch like one of my heroes get absolutely just murdered
flatlined. Yeah, no, and like
when he
so
was looking
everyone's saying
so
Tony's
good
done.
too.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. That's the thing here because Tony looked good in that fight before
He
getting
looked
flatlined like that.
amazing.
Yeah,
His
he
heart
looked.
was there. He wanted to be there.
He won the round on the scorecards.
Yeah.
Uh,
And sorry, go ahead.
No, no, you're yeah, no, and so that's what makes this. I was going to say this what makes this fight interesting. So I'll let you finish.
He is moving. So Tony, so he fights at lightweight, but he actually initially started out his career in welterweight in the regional scene, I believe.
And in
He's
Ultimate Fighter,
oh yeah, in Ultimate Fighter, he was a
oh yeah,
welterweight.
Ultimate Fighter is one of the ways. We mentioned this briefly in episode one. The Ultimate Fighter is one of the mechanisms through which UFC fighters will get signed. Usually, they're signed if they're really high profile. They get signed directly as free agents.
It's essentially
Um,
it's a reality TV show.
yes,
Kind of like
that's
you follow
Ultimate.
the fighters through their kind of like mini tournament to get a contract. It's actually really fun to watch, sort of. The more
But it's
recent
reality
seasons.
TV.
Yeah, it's reality TV. But he started as welterweight, so he was a higher weight class than what he currently fought in now. So to see him kind of move back up to that weight class is going to be interesting because now that means he doesn't have to cut weight. And I know that the going back to weight cutting, it saps your energy. It completely takes it out of you. Especially when you're cutting 10 pounds, 15 pounds, whatever you walk around at
Mhm.
down, it takes the wind out of your sails. It completely just ugh, it's the worst.
Yeah, no, and
So
one thing it's documented to do is that fighters can't. It'll make fighters not be able to take as hard hits. Like when we talk about fighters' chins, that's their ability to take a hit and not get knocked out. Fighters who weight cut a lot um, usually have markedly worse chins.
not even the chin, but it completely messes with your brain. Like when I was going through my weight cut, it wasn't a big weight cut like a lot of these fighters do because obviously they're at a higher level, blah blah blah. But I noticed that like like I was very scatterbrained. I would just my thoughts would just be everywhere. That was like my brain just essentially just being starved. I'm
Yeah,
just starved of nutrients and water, and it when you're cutting weight like that and then having to fight the next day, your brain isn't all there. Like you tend to do things that you wouldn't do, or you make judgment calls that you wouldn't usually do because you're not thinking straight.
right,
So to be
exactly.
able to get rid of that weight cut, or to even just cut a little bit of weight to down to welterweight for him, that could play in his advantage, and I'm really excited to see how that's going to work out in his favor, if it does
Yeah,
work out in his favor.
absolutely. And but it's not like he's getting a cakewalk. But I think his opponent here is a good matchup.
I yes, but Leech is also a scary
Yeah.
dude.
Li Jingliang is he's
He's a
usually he's
scary
ranked
person.
I think he's like usually ranked 12 like 12 to 15ish in welterweight. Let me see where he's ranked right now. Yeah, he's number 14 right now. Coming off a loss to no, coming off a win to keep his ranking, I believe. Yes, he fought number 15 Muslim Salikov and won, so he kept his ranking. Um, and so his nickname is the Leech. He's the most successful male UFC fighter from China. Um, and I really like the guy. I speak a little Chinese, so I hear him in his interviews, and he's very charismatic.
He's
The translators
funny.
don't really get it across. He's a funny dude. He's charismatic. He got absolutely starched by one of the hottest prospects in the sport, Hamzat Chimaev. And then for Chimaev's next fight, he showed up and asked him a question at the press conference, which is just
I forgot
hilarious.
about that until now. He looks like shows up as like, and he's like joking around and dicking around with Chimaev too. Like
Yeah,
I think there's like a mutual respect and kind of buddy buddy now.
exactly. Yeah, which is just great. He does have a stain on his record. He had one of before I started watching. Apparently, he had one of the most egregious, awful eye gouges. Um,
Ooh.
against it was against Jake Matthews. I haven't seen the video, but apparently it was really bad. And I've stopped liking fighters over less. Looking at you, Priscilla Cachoeira, although hers are really egregious. She did the same thing. But I didn't see that. I think he seems like he hasn't done anything like that since. So I think he's learned his lesson. Um, but he's an exciting guy. He's a charismatic guy, fun fighter. He's a striker, and so that's
Oh, I just
what
pulled
he
up the
can.
video of the eye gout. Oh
Is it
man.
is it bad?
Oh, it's yeah.
Ugh, ugh, that's unfortunate.
It looks very
You'll have to send me that video after. Yeah,
it looks like it's
um,
on purpose.
it probably was. I mean, look, it's like the Cachoeira one where Priscilla Cachoeira was in the middle of getting submitted by Jillian Robertson. She reached up and raked at the eyes to try and get Robertson to let go of the submission, which is just so classless. Um, yeah, so that's why people don't like Jing Liang, and then also people are racist. But yeah, I think the eye gouge thing is reasonable. um, so, but yeah, but he's a striker. He has decent wrestling defense. He's not an amazing wrestler, but he can kind of like he can get a takedown if needed. Um, and so I think this should be an interesting fight. I think Tony's going to come in with a size disadvantage, but I
Oh,
think
for
his
sure.
jiu-jitsu evens out any wrestling that Jing Liang might do. So I before I make a prediction on that, I'd like to see how Tony appears at media days. And
There's
see
a
how lucid he is.
I forget who was it may have been Anthony Smith, may have been another commentator analyst. there's a correlation between um Tony Ferguson's being eccentric and his performance. I think he was saying like the more level-headed um Tony is, the more like what was it? It's actually gonna bother me now. I can't think about it.
Oh, you can post in the tweet after you did, if it doesn't bother
Yeah,
you.
it's something about along the lines of like if when Tony is at his craziest, that's when he's at his best.
Yeah, dude salsa danced in the middle of a fight while fainting, against one of the baddest dudes in the
Was that
sport,
a
Rafael dos
RDA?
Anjos. Yeah, it was.
Oh, that was so
Dude
fun to watch.
just did a slow spin salsa dancing in the octagon while throwing feints.
He's a
That's crazy, Tony.
he's allergic to bad fight. He's must see TV.
Yep. Even
So
yeah, no, even in the Oliveira fight, even there was that armbar to talk about. So yeah, no,
I'm excited
so
for it.
yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't remember when that was announced for. I think it might have been for. Oh, it's for UFC 279, so it's happening very soon.
That's the last point I want to make is that I am nervous about this because
Short
this
notice.
is very soon. So Tony Ferguson got KO'd brutally, like we said earlier, by I can't think of his name right now. I'm brain farting. God,
By Michael Chandler,
Michael Chandler. He got KO'd brutally by him earlier this year in May, I want to say,
early May.
and now he's taking a fight in September. To the uninformed, that seems like oh, it's plenty of time, but like that's in my opinion, that's not a lot of time. I
Not to
think I
mention
did
he's coming off a four. He's on a four-fight losing streak and has not won a fight since June of 2019.
right. So I'm interested how that's gonna go, given just kind of the timeline. I know he's actually started to work with more dedicated camps. I think he went to Jackson Wing for a little bit and trained with those guys. So
Jackson
we'll
Wink
see.
being the camp that John Jones, former champion, who we talked about in episode one, was there. He was their star guy,
And Holly
um,
Holmes.
and Holly Holm as well, former bantamweight champion. She beat Rousey.
So seeing him go to kind of a dedicated camp, I think that's gonna play in his favor a
Yeah,
little bit. It's gonna get him just the structure that he needs. And I think he
right.
learned that too. I think I think there's probably a sit down moment where he was like, I should probably like work on everything.
We were joking that Michael Chandler kicked the CTE out of Tony with
Yeah,
that kick.
right.
It's like he set his brain, and suddenly he's like a reasonable human
He
being who
reset
actually listens to
everything.
him. So I don't know.
It gave him a
Crazy.
point of clarity.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'm excited. It adds a marquee fight to a card that desperately won. Because
I'm
oh boy,
yeah.
279 was so weak. We'll talk about 279 was a little
We'll
closer.
still
It's tougher.
watch it, but I'm not expecting much out of it. But we'll see.
Hey,
We'll
hey, hey,
see.
hey! Look,
I've said
Erosa Dawoodu is gonna slap. I'm telling you. I've been
oh
hyping
my
this one
boy
for
my
weeks,
boy
and I'll
Chris
continue to
Barnett's
hype
on that card.
it.
So that's good. That's fun to watch.
Yeah, we'll talk about that card when it gets closer. We'll probably cut it here. We'll talk about Gon versus Tuivasa next week because we actually have an off week.
Oh, thank
This
God. I have a Saturday nights myself.
week. um, so yeah. But yes, yeah. Thanks for joining us. I know we didn't do anything furry this time, but I felt that intro part was
Oh no,
important.
I can hear the masses yelling out at us. Oh no, how dare you not
Yeah,
do
no,
anything
all
furry?
my furry
Oh,
friends have been bugging to listen to my podcast. It'll be so sad. Oh,
oh
but yeah.
no.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions at all, leave it in the Twitter thread under this. Leave it in the YouTube comments. Um, add us on Twitter. We're so happy to answer questions.
Yeah,
There was some stuff I didn't cover, but I want this podcast to seem accessible to those who don't know about the sport. That is our mission statement. It's to bridge the gap between fandom and mixed martial arts, or really just anybody looking to learn about the sport a little bit who may not watch. So any questions at all, we're happy to answer. Like we literally talk about MMA for
it's
hours for fun. Like this is our like we will be so happy to explain.
it's literally
So
taken over almost every facet of my life at this point.
I mean, you do it. You do jujitsu. I
Yeah,
just I who watches.
it's
Props to
literally
you.
like talk about the fight here, talk about the fight in our Telegram chat, talk about our fight in private messages. I
Yep.
go to my gym. I talk about fights there.
Yep.
I'm not complaining. I love it. It's great. It's definitely been. It's just fun to watch.
Yep.
Again, I can't tell you why I like to watch it. I just love it.
It's fun, you know. Like there is, you know, I realize there's definitely kind of a barrier to it where people are like, oh God, it's so, you know, uncouth or whatever. You know, it's so
It's
brutal.
it's
But
human
there is.
cockfighting.
It's the first thing we opened up the podcast with in episode 1 is that there's a lot of nuance behind it. And it's fun. There are some really cool moments in the sport. So
But no, yeah, as
anyway,
always, feel free to follow us on Twitter at dogfightpod, and there's also a link to our YouTube page, and you can follow me on Twitter at my personal page at Uriah Stone.
or on
Uh,
my Twitter at SethNY.
and yeah, we're gonna try to figure out what we're gonna do for the next episode since it's kind of an off week, but we'll get you some content out there.
For sure. We'll have something for you